what we're talking about, social intervention programs or policies, etc. As the country is suffering, how do we put into perspective either making sure that we are able to target or prioritize some of these interventions, and to which sectors or to which vulnerable sections of the population? And no better a person who has great experience in this sector, in this industry, working with civil society through Child Rights International is Bright Appear. He's Executive Director for Child Rights International. He's right here. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Roland.
No, great. If you take a look at the difficulties the country is going through currently, would you say that all your experiences within the sector that you work with, in child protection, within the vulnerable space, education, etc., we're likely to see some level of those populations suffering?
Yes, of course. There are issues that can occur or can happen. And that is why it is important for us to open the discussion up, to look at what would be in the best interest of the country and how do we protect the vulnerable groups. And the way and manner we can also handle our social intervention so that we will get the kind of impact, the results that we want. Because if you look at most of the social interventions, it's just a fruit of a very good economic foundations that you have. So if you have the foundation and it's shaken, then there's a need for you to look at how best you can implement your social interventions in a manner that would also address social issues within the environment. So there are issues that we need to look at as a country, and how best we want to position ourselves in the difficult times that we are in to implement social interventions that will be profitable. That would also look at how best the vulnerable society would also be comfortable within the difficulties that we have.
Okay. So now let's take the issues one after the other, especially within the space that you have been contributing to in the public arena, and then also within civil society. If we have to take education, which are the vulnerabilities that you have identified that you think that government needs to keep an eye on, even though we're in difficulties?
Yeah, I think so far, if you look at the social intervention that we have implemented, we have clearly identified the vulnerable groups at every level. So, for instance, you look at the school feeding program. It's clearly looking at feeding, malnutrition, and enrollment. If you look at it, the core of it is to ensure that we do enrollment. So it has identified certain specific areas that we can implement such programs, especially where there's so much poverty that people cannot even get food to eat. So if you look at that particular program, we have achieved some results in terms of the enrollment and also malnutrition. If you look at the World Bank report and other report that we have around, it clearly gives an indication that, yeah, that policy has really identified the vulnerable groups and addressing issues around those vulnerable groups. So in terms of results, we have that. But every policy you have to design in such a way that you keep some kind of consistency in terms of how you run it and the results, how you even monitor the results and how you even manage the process. Because such social policies, if you are not careful, you tend to lose sight of what you need to do in order to make sure that you get the kind of results that you want. So management is very critical in that process. And because it is a social intervention program, you have to be very organic. You have to be open up to suggestions and see how best you can also get the kind of results that you want. You look at the capitation grant. It also has its own purpose. It has also identified the vulnerable groups, especially people who cannot pay school fees. For that matter, government has dedicated a certain amount to take care of some basic needs at that level. That is a bane on children. So that policy has also identified the vulnerable groups. There are policies like the free SHS, which has also identified a vulnerable group not in terms of targeting, but to look at it from the universal point of view.
Okay.
Because free SHS is one of the policies that is not targeting, but is looking at people who pay taxes, people who also contribute to the development of this country, should be able to get some kind of support systems. And free SHS is also one policy that is not looking at individuals. It's looking at addressing systems and then also ensuring that our school system is conducive for everyone. So if you have the capacity or not, the essence of the policy is to ensure that majority of Ghanaians will have access to secondary education.
Okay.
That's the essence of the policy. Okay. So it has also identified that vulnerable group. That may not necessarily be on the basis of need, but is also looking at how best to strengthen our educational system. So if such a policy has identified the vulnerable group in that context, then it's also required that we take steps to ensure that we protect that kind of a policy so that we don't have any difficulty with it.
We'll come to that because free SHS is a very thorny issue.
Yeah.
Just not too long ago, we saw that while we have achieved a lot with school feeding program, caterers had been agitating, and it's also because they say they haven't been paid. Ideally, such situations, how do they affect objectives of such programs, like the school feeding program?
Yeah, of course. Once you have established a system and you have made some kind of allocation for the program, then you expect that within the value chain of the program, everything must work perfectly. So if you have a situation where a certain part of the system is not working perfectly, then those who are the end beneficiaries are going to suffer. So if caterers are complaining of resources, then we have to go back to the basis of the policy itself to see whether we did something wrong or we are on course. So for instance, in identifying people who are supposed to cook for our children, there are processes from the beginning. There are processes of qualification and the kind of people that must cook, the capacity that they should have, and also be able to cook. If not because of that program, I wouldn't even know that there are certain caterers that must have experience in bulk cooking, because when you have that capacity, you are able to use a little resource to maximize the kind of thing that you have to do and still get the value for it and all that. So these are processes that you have to go through to identify a caterer to be able to provide that services. But looking at the way and manner we are running the school feeding program, we are going to encounter the problem that we are having because the selection process is the system has abandoned it. If you pick...
What was the initial objective or criteria for selection who should cook?
Yeah, you have to be a professional caterer, and there are certain capacity that you need to have. One is that you should be able to cook one term without payment, because it's normal with government system to be able to provide the services before government will come to your, to do the payment. And then you also have to be somebody who understand, how to even cook bulk, whichever way they put it, but majority of them don't have that capacity. You go to where they cook, the environment where they cook for the children is not even good. The kind of food that they cook for the children is not even something that we should be proud of and all that. So once we begin to experience that, we're going to have that difficulty. Again, one of the core of the policy is for us to procure everything that we cook for our children domestically.
Locally?
Locally.
Have we been doing that?
No. I don't think that we've been able to do that, because if you look at the kind of rice that we cook for the children, these are all imported goods, and most of the things are imported. So you expect certain level of commitment in terms of resources from those people. And if government is not forthcoming with their payment, they'll run into difficulties, and that will begin to affect the outcome of the program.
We notice on the ground that from even eras past, whether it's NDC or even transition into MPP, some of the leading caterers are just normal women politicians. Should that be the case, based on your experiences on the ground as Child Rights International?
It should not. Looking at the objective of the program, it's irrespective of who you are and you have the capacity you should be able to, and you qualify, you should be able to be on the program. But where you just pick somebody and say that go and cook for the children for this number of terms, and then I'll do the payment, without necessarily taking the person through all these processes to qualify the person to say that you can cook for our children, it makes the policy somehow not run on a professional basis in terms of what is expected, and even how, you know, the kind of ingredient that you need to put together to get the kind of food that the children need at that particular time and all that. So we have left some of the aspect of the policy in the hands of people who are not qualified, especially those who cook for our children. You go, either is an MP's son, daughter, wife, MC, all that, you know, or is influenced by a political system for people to acquire those things and all that. And that, for me, it is what is causing some of these issues that we are facing now.
How has that affected the vulnerable, the targeted vulnerable, in terms of the children who are supposed to be enjoying this? Because
it's so obvious that you don't even need any practical experience to be able to determine what the outcome will be on the end beneficiaries of the policy. Because once you begin to complain about resources, then obviously you are telling me that you don't have enough to meet the requirement that the children need in the classroom and all that. So it's either you begin to cook food within the limited resources that you have, and you do not meet the kind of nutritional value of the food that the children need. And at the end of the day, government will tend to put in more money and not getting the kind of outcome that is expected.
Okay. There's a bigger conversation that has been ongoing since the free SHS was introduced. That is about means testing, targeting those who really cannot pay, and then you make them pay, and then you do an adjustment, and then you make those who can pay, those who can just augment payment, etc. What has been your own observation as an organization on this, as well as even for the partners that you speak to?
Yeah, well, you see, the free SHS is a unique concept, looking at where we are coming from as a country, because there's a history we have when it comes to education. Because you know that even during the Nkrumah's days, we established the scholarships for a class of people to also have access to education. And now you see the benefit that we are reaping. And you look at other interventions that we have provided. We have done targeting since independence till now, and we have never rolled out a universal social intervention program, apart from the national health insurance, the birth and death certification, and even those things are services, social intervention that you pay for it, like SNIT and all that. Yes. These are all universal in nature, but it has economic gains attached to it and all that. So you pay your SNIT, at the end of the day, you go for it when you need it. So free SHS is one of the policies that has given some kind of legitimacy to government and also fulfilling certain constitutional provision, because you know that in our constitution is purely built on welfare. And a nation that is built on welfare, there are certain things that you have to take upon yourself to say that you want to do for the citizens. Then again, you look at the Article 36 and 37 of the Constitution. It also emphasize some of these policies that we have to implement. So free SHS is very unique. And initially, I was part of the group that says that we should start with targeting, because in implementing such a program, you need to understand the numbers that you are going to deal with, so that you can do your projections properly. Because if you don't know the numbers, you don't understand the dynamic that exists, and the numbers keep increasing, then it means that your budget allocation would also keep increasing and all that. So we thought that there would be a need for us to have the targeting system. But government came out with the explanation that, look, there are people who pay taxes, there are people who also contribute to the development of this country, but there have never been any single intervention that is also targeting those people, not because they cannot provide, but the focus of government is to gain some kind of legitimacy in the system. Because, for instance, if you don't only become a father by virtue of giving birth, but you also become the father by virtue of the care that you provide for your children and all that. So if we have come to that level and decided that we want to roll this program on a universal basis where every person can enjoy, it is a program that you have to look at a lot of factors, in order to arrive at a certain conclusion, because you are dealing with numbers. And in doing that, then it means that you'd also have to design a management system that will look at all the issues, put it together, and decide that, okay, this is how I want to run it, and the kind of support system that I have to build within the whole arrangement to give it that kind of efficiency that I want. Because if you are dealing with numbers, people can decide to put two people together and even take money for two people. But at the end of the day, the money will reach a person. So that efficiency is very critical. Then again, such universal policy, you'd also need a monitoring system to be able to know whether you are achieving the kind of results that you want. And obviously, we are getting numbers. If you go to the rural community, at least my sector, now if you go to most of the cocoa grain areas, enrollment rates among children is between 92 to 95%, right from the primary to secondary school. And that is a huge achievement. So free SHS is not a policy that we have to just discuss it on the basis of who implemented it or not. But we need to understand the foundation of the policy and decide that what do we do to strengthen it, or what do we do to expand it. But if you look at what is happening now, government is not clear on what they want to do with our social intervention. But it's a clear indication, because we hear that we want to rationalize, we want to review, we want to restructure and all those things. It comes back to the same thing, that probably because we are not managing the policy very well, we think that it is having it's affecting the economy of this country. But I don't think that any social intervention must affect our economy, because social interventions are the fruits of the strong economic background that we have. And if we implement it very well, we would also be having some kind of gains when it comes to building a very strong economy. So if we are talking about restructuring, we are talking about targeting, we are talking about rationalization and all that, the core of our social intervention program, we have to look at the objective and the concept behind the implementation of some of these social intervention programs.
Okay. When you go to the schools, you'll find that sometimes the schools are constrained. And so I'm sure you've spoken to parents,
exactly,
and they'll tell you, even some of the big schools, they're so-called A-class schools, they are constrained. There are constraints in getting food on time, getting some provisions are supposed to be coming from central government on time, etc. At what point in time should we be saying that we need to make a section of the population that can pay bear some level of cost? And how should we do we need a national stakeholder program for that? Or
yeah, well, once you begin to ask parents to pay, looking at the concept that developed the free SHS, then you are situating this particular policy outside, as I will no longer call it a free SHS policy, but it will turn to a different policy altogether. So our concern as a nation should be on the management of the program, because if you look at the resource allocation that we've made, and if you want to manage it very well, it should be able to cater for our children in secondary schools. So if you look at the fallout issues, these are things that are coming up. So even if we ask parents to pay and we don't address the management issues, we will still have the difficulties that we are having. So the focus should be on how do we strengthen the system to make it more functional, to make it more effective. And the policy do not even restrain parents from paying certain aspect of it, because at least there are a number of children that I've sent to secondary school, and before they went, I spent quite some money to take them to the school. But the point is that once they enter the environment, there are certain services that they have to enjoy. So there are parents are paying for certain things that is not, because if you look at the structure, 18 items listed is not even enough, to say that children will not, parents are bearing a zero sum in terms of what they are contributing to the program. But my concern is that if we move the policy from the universality and place it on the basis of targeting, then we have changed the face of the free SHS program. It's no longer a free SHS program. It's a new program that we are introducing.
Partial free.
I don't know whether it should partial free or whatever it is, but it will not have the same image as the free SHS.
Okay.
But I strongly believe that no matter the kind of difficulties that we are going through, if you sum up all the social intervention programs that we are doing, you look at the capitation grant, you look at the feeding program, you look at the LIP, which is one of the stable social intervention programs that we have in this country. You look at the free SHS. It's just a fraction of our GDP. So if you look at it, it should not have any effect on the kind of economic system that we want to run. So what we need to do is that let's pick the program and strengthen the management aspect of all these social interventions and begin to monitor the impact that it's making, and then quantify that, and then make it economic benefit.
Just 4 days ago, the finance minister was addressing the press, and this is just a prelude to what will be done, because there was the IMF team here, and they had left, and so was briefing the public on what the engagements are with the IMF, the Ghana PCPEC program, etc. And he did make that there was a commitment doubling the livelihood empowerment against poverty program. Yeah. That's a LEAP program, giving the stipend per household from 45 Ghana cedis to 90 Ghana cedis. I'm reading from it. Okay. And then also the coverage area will be expanded to include 2.5 million extremely poor by 2024. If you go to the communities where you have young people who are from such homes, and then also you have those in cocoa growing communities involved with child labor, and then they have grandparents who need to be benefiting from this. Shouldn't we be giving the aged who are captured under LIP more than 90 Ghana cedis?
Yes, of course. If you look at the benefit that the LIP program is bringing to us, because as we speak now, we have over 350,000 households benefiting from LIP program. And as I've said, LIP is one of the stable social intervention programs that we have now, as we speak, compared to most of one of the well-established social intervention programs that we have. So if the vehicle that we are using to drive this particular policy is giving us results, then there is a need for us to channel most of our investment through the LIP program. Because if you look at the criteria for you to even benefit, if you have a vulnerable child, one of the key things is that if you are benefiting from it, then you have to send your child to school. And that has also increased enrollment in schools. And there are a lot of children who are also going to school. And it is also giving people independence in terms of resourcing them to be on their own so that they exit. Because there are people that have exited from the program. And I think that if we really want to care for people, vulnerable people in society, I think that, yes, we have difficulties, but it is also a good news that government has even taken steps, has recognized that there is a need for me to increase the amount and all that. But again, whether that amount will be enough or not, at least there is that attempt for us to look at how best we can increase the resources in that. But left to me alone, we can do more than what we are doing. But at least we understand the concept that at any point in time, we have to strengthen our social interventions. And I think that is what we are doing.
There's a creeping concern. It's always been there, but Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, we still have young people working in cocoa growing communities and on farms. Yeah. Is it that it affects their education, their level of development, or it is because it's a pervasive problem and so has to be stopped?
I think that with issues of child labor in this context, it's more about education. It's the thing that, if you look at the discussion since, it borders on making sure that children remain in school. So if there's any other factors in the environment that will take that from the children, then there's a need for us to do that. Then again, it's also issues about labor. You know, how do we prepare our children to properly enter the labor market? And then also at a certain time make available the labor system for those who deserve it. So it's like a social and economic issue together, and where people feel that people are using children for cheap labor is also denying them their right to education. So there's a need for us to see how best we can let everybody have the space so that they can do whatever they want to do and all that. So for me as a country, we have taken steps. Under when the current chief of staff was a deputy minister at employment, there is this comprehensive program that she introduced. I think then the minister was Honorable Akomia. They steered the NEPLE program, developed the Ghana Child Labour Monitoring System, and that is currently being used by organizations to also implement the child labour interventions and all that. And it's giving results, especially when you go to the cocoa sector. There's a lot of gains that have been made. We know that the fishing sector is still suffering. You pick the mining sector, is also an emerging issue that is coming up that we have to pay attention to. But these are things that when we develop systems to deal with it, gradually we'll be getting our children to the right places that they need to be at a particular time.
Now, as we wind up the discussion, there are 3 more questions that I want to ask. There's a creeping concern about children reluctant to pursue school, especially at the tail end of the basic level, or let's say from primary, before they make entry into JSS. And then even if they're in JSS, to go into SHS in Galamsey areas. What sort of national communication intervention needs to be developed to make sure that communities are conscientized why such young people need to be in school and not go to Galamsey fields?
Yeah, well, Roland, is one of the things that I was expecting to see when the IMC committee did their work, to see how they can protect young people in that sector. Because in the mining sector, it's a complex issue. One, the health issues, and then also children work under certain hard conditions and all that. So I was expecting that in one of their outcomes, to determine the way forward, there will be a policy that will drive the removal of children from that environment. Because in most of the areas that we've worked, people have even abandoned their cocoa farms and they are doing Galamsey. Children have abandoned school and they go to do Galamsey. Currently, we are following about 5 kids. Every day they wake up and go to the Galamsey site to work. And some go there, they spend 2 weeks before they will return home. There's this particular child that we are following to look at how we can support. Because once they begin to get money, daily money for it, it will be very difficult for you to even rehabilitate them, for them to come back. So I was expecting that kind of system to deal with that. So government must look at how best we can deal with that issue within the national framework. Otherwise, though we may be stopping the Galamsey, but there's also another group of people who are training children to sustain the Galamsey in certain areas and all that. So it's important for us to look at. I've not seen any policy by government to decide on what they want to do with young people in that sector. But I feel that there's a need for us to do that.
Now, we know that this IMF program is going to take us to 2026. Why should government, through the Ministry of Finance, and then its other interministerial agencies, prioritize social intervention policies?
It's very crucial, because you need to save the social environment, so that certain things would also not happen to affect the economic foundation that we want to build. And for me, government should come clear on its position on how they want to sustain social interventions, so that if there is anything that we also need to contribute, we do that. But as we speak, I personally do not think that the current social intervention program that we have is so much a burden on the state that we cannot do it, looking at the benefit that we are getting from it. But let government be clear on what as a nation we want to do with our social interventions.
Well, thank you very much. We've been grateful. We'll follow up with the academia and speak to some notable scientists in the social science area or department, and then we'll see how we can bring the communication to that. And then we'll do that subsequently. Thank you very much. Executive Director for Child Rights International, Bright Appiah in the studio. Again, commencing a whole public debate and discussion on why social intervention and its protectionism should become a focus, as Ghana now has a pact through its PCPEC program with the International Monetary Fund. It's why we have to go for a break. When we come back, we'll bring you some related discussions and then bring you a wrap-up on the show today. We're taking a break. We'll be right back.